Hello, I'm Assistant Commonwealth's Attorney Dan Laren, here once again with the case of the week. We spend a lot of time and effort working with the police on cases called LFAs, a larceny from an auto, which basically amounts to someone breaking into a car or opening an unsecured vehicle and stealing anything they can find inside. These are crimes that are committed with some frequency here in Lexington, along with other thefts and burglaries that are related to this sort of crime. And I'm going to ask Assistant Commonwealth's Attorney Kimberly Henderson Baird, who's here with me today, to talk about a particular LFA case she had recently.
Hello, Dan. I did have one recently that just got sentenced in the last couple of weeks. There were 3 co-defendants involved. One of them is still pending, but it's Jamie and Jessica Voss, who are brother and sister, and their friend Philip Perkins. And the case came to us by an investigation with Detective Kevin Duane. And these 3 individuals went through several neighborhoods in Lexington, specifically Firebrook, Beaumont, Andover, Copperfield, and Heartland. They stole cars, a few of them, and just ran, I guess, the gas out and balled the tires and just had big fun with them. And then they also stole a couple of cars from people's garage doors that were open. And then they also just went around trying to find open and unlocked car doors and took lots of property from there. So in all, we had almost, that we could identify, about 36 victims. I anticipate there was much more than that.
Okay. What were some of the issues that you dealt with in dealing with this particular case?
The biggest one would have been value, because depending on the values, you know, on theft cases would affect what sentence they ultimately could get. And so while initially we may have thought the value was one thing, by the time a vehicle got fixed or insurance kicked in or whatever, those values changed. So that did affect some of the things that we had. Another issue was trying to contact these victims. Some of them, as I said, we had property that we could not identify a victim for, and some of them we had a victim, but we couldn't touch base with them. And so we ended up with just a small number of victims at the end.
The victims that you could reach, were you able to decide more or less what the loss was in this case? Yes,
we could. A lot of them, like I said, had submitted their loss to insurance companies, so mainly the loss would have been the deductible, because we don't reimburse insurance companies, unfortunately. And so it would have been the deductible. Some people did not submit their insurance, submitted to insurance, and so we just determined what was missing, what they did not have recovered, and how much the value was that they paid for that.
And what was that figure?
It would have been, and I know I just told you that, $7,164, and all 3 of them are responsible in various amounts for that, depending on what they did. But that only covers, I think, 7 victims. That doesn't even cover all of them, because like I said, some of them we couldn't reach, and some of them had basically chalked it up that they weren't going to get their money back, so they didn't really return phone calls.
What was the general sense of the victims that you did talk to about this crime?
Not happy. They weren't happy. I mean, and nobody is, obviously, when that happens. But particularly when they found out it was a spree that these individuals were going on, that made them even more incensed that they went through and took things from their property.
How did the case progress through the system?
The case was indicted on numerous counts. All 3 of them had multiple counts of theft and burglary-related offenses, felonies and misdemeanors. Early on, Mr. Perkins' attorney mainly asked, I guess, the case be delayed a little bit because he got into the Hope Center program at the jail, and that's a substance abuse program for individuals that were in there. Because the court had put a no-contact order on Mr. Perkins and Mr. Voss couldn't get into the program immediately. So it progressed a little bit so that he could complete that substance abuse program at the jail. He then ultimately, both of them, Jamie Voss and Philip Perkins, ultimately entered a guilty plea to numerous theft and burglary charges.
And what was the sentence that the court imposed on these individuals?
My offer to them was to plead to numerous felony counts, and some of them were misdemeanors just by the value of the property that was taken. And so depending on how the judge ran those sentences, it could have been anywhere from 3 to 10 years. What the judge does in making that ultimate decision is look at their prior criminal history. Mr. Voss did not have one. Some of these offenses occurred just before his 18th birthday on his 18th birthday and right after. So he had been in jail since that time. So he did not have an adult record. Mr. Perkins had a couple of misdemeanor thefts and criminal trespass. So the judge takes a look at that and the fact that he completed the Hope Center program in the case, and ultimately he placed both of them on, ran the sentences concurrently for 3 years and placed them both on probation.
And were all three of these defendants, you identified one as being 18, were they all relatively young compared to other cases we have like this?
Yes, as I said, Jamie Voss was 18, and then Philip Perkins and Jamie's sister Jessica were both in their very early 20s.
Okay. So is it any surprise to you that the judge probated the defendants in this particular case?
Not in the least. And because of the nature of the case, I did oppose probation, but ultimately that decision is up to the judge, and despite my objection, he probated them anyway.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Probation for a young group of thieves that were stealing from vehicles, the vehicles themselves, and breaking into garages to commit these crimes. Stay tuned. We'll talk about some more crimes of this nature and how they're treated by the court system here in Fayette County here on Case of the Week.